Based on that, there's no way you're going to find DNA in something like a million-year-old animal, even in permafrost. There's another thing called genetic entropy. Natural selection is blind to most mutations, so they tend to build up over time. Species cannot be billions of years old, let alone millions of years old, or so many mutations would have built up that things would be extinct.
DNA barcoding.
Oh yeah.
What is that, and why do we care?
That's an interesting question.
Nice.
DNA is a long...
I need to start making like, what do you call that right there? Like a short preview? What is it? The stinger? I need to make stingers for my live stream, but it's all just like really mundane stuff. Like you add all that music and all those quick shots and those quick pans and edits, but it's all me just being like, this coffee's good. I'm hungry today. Did you guys see that live stream the other day? It's like... I showered yesterday.
Long and fragile molecule. It breaks down in the cell, and it breaks down in the dirt after an organism dies. Yet evolutionary biologists claim to have found DNA hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years old. But this contradicts the timeline given in the Bible. Can these two be reconciled? Dr. Carter, you have a PhD in coral reef ecology and genetics.
This looks like an Orthothug skit.
And you studied this topic quite a bit. And you actually chose the title of this episode, DNA Can't Be More Than 4,500 Years Old. Why that title?
Interesting. I didn't know that position. My ears are perked.
It's actually a multifaceted title. It means multiple different things. There are a lot of things in science to show us that DNA cannot be millions of years old, and scripture says that DNA is only thousands of years old. So we're talking about DNA breakdown in the cell. How long can a species survive against the withering blast of mutations that all species are picking up? We're talking about DNA in the ground. How long can DNA last in a cave? Do we really have DNA from a woolly mammoth from 300, 400,000 years ago? Is that really true? We're talking about being able to date something called Y chromosome Adam, the father of all of humanity today, and mitochondrial Eve, the one mother who's the female ancestor of all humans alive today. How long ago did they live? Well, the science says not that long ago. There's another thing called DNA barcoding, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But just by looking at one particular gene that just mutates at just the right rate, you can separate species. I mean, a huge range of species of different types of organisms. The species seem to be the same age, as if some giant environmental effect happened at some fairly recent time in the past.
Okay.
And then we have...
Thank you, Brezen. $5 for Nashville. Gets me to 44 of the 50, y'all. Let's break that goal.
The biblical date. So when we're talking about if there's dinosaur DNA, those dinosaurs must have died out in the flood.
Okay.
Woolly mammoth DNA has to be after the flood. There's a post-flood animals, and the flood was about 25 or 4,500 years ago.
Okay.
So that's where the number comes from. DNA can't be more than 4,500 years old.
Okay. That's a lot of
That's
topics.
A whole lot, yes.
Lots to unpack across a number of different fields there. Let's start with your first point.
Okay.
How do we know that all species have to be young based on mutation rates?
One of the primary axioms, in fact, Dr. John Sanford called the primary axiom in evolution, is that mutations happen, but then natural selection can remove those mutations. But he and I and others have shown very clearly, mathematically, computationally, and even in biology, that natural selection is blind to most mutations. So if you had a spelling error in a book, like a textbook, it's not going to cause you to fail your final exam.
Let me explain what he means by this. If you have a mutation that happens, there's nothing, because natural selection is how it's viewed, is that the environment will eventually dictate the life, the usefulness, or whatever, the viability of the trait or the mutation, because the mutation is just the thing that occurs, but the evolution proponent argues that it's not just the mutation. The mutation actually follows with some sort of mechanistic advantage or disadvantage that we don't know until after time and nature and the environment has its way with it. But what he's saying is a mutation itself has no connectivity or interaction with the external environment, a mutation itself. There's no connection. There's no through line. There's no Morse. There's no code. There's no communication. There's no input output. It's just a mutation internally. Those things occur inside you, if anything. Right? There's no environment going, well, we'll see about that mutation.
But if you had many millions of spelling errors, you couldn't possibly pass your final exam.
Yeah.
So any one mutation is almost irrelevant to an organism. Most mutations. Some of them are deadly. Those get removed very.
Carpenter, you guys remember Carpenter? He used to jump on a bunch and argue, well, you could just, for the sake of argument, say most mutations mathematically, habitually are neutral. But even Carpenter told me, he having studied much more than me, mentions that no, over time it's actually not neutral. It's not benign. It actually degrades over time more so. It's never building on something, and it's never demonstrable that it actually builds on something.
Quickly, but most of them don't do very much, but they're still mistakes. And natural selection cannot remove them. So they tend to build up over time.
Okay.
Which means as they're inexorably building up, species should be getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And eventually there'll be so many mistakes that no species can possibly survive.
Yes. What's true from what we know is that mutations don't add things. It's not a building block. It's not like, oh, a mutation happened. Now I get a beak. Wow, I can't wait. Oh, the mutation happened. I'm growing a penis. Celebrate. Yay. Oh, I hope there's a mutation that has a vagina. I really hope so. I'll just wait with Grandpa for 50 million years. It's degradation. It degrades. It's like a mutation isn't like a good thing. Oh, we just need more mutations so I can grow fingernails and so I can peel an orange properly.
It's called genetic entropy. And that tells us that species lifespans have a limit. Now, there's no hard limit, and it's going to be different for every different type of organism, but species cannot be billions of years old, let alone millions of years old, or so many mutations would have built up that things would be extinct.
Okay. Like they wouldn't be able to reproduce or even just function normally.
Yeah.
Before we continue, quick heads up, stick around even eyes. So isn't that an example of evolution?
Well, interestingly, the two examples that you picked are examples of something that's broken.
Hold on a second.
That there are some mutations that actually benefit an organism. I'm thinking of
Where?
A polar bear with a broken melanin gene, or even fish in caves that gradually lose eyesight or even eyes. So
No, that's not. That's not. No, that's not. How do you prove that's a mutation?
isn't that an example of evolution?
Well, interestingly, the two examples that you picked are examples of something that's broken. It's a broken melanin gene that produces the white bear. It's the broken system for producing eyeballs that produces an eyeless fish. Another example is sickle cell anemia in Central.
So imagine a piece of a car that's broken, and it's like you argue that it's like ultimately great. It's great that it broke.
Africa, a lot of people carry sickle cell anemia because that trait allows them to survive childhood malarial infections. So it means they're more likely to reach adulthood and have children. So yeah, natural selection is selecting for people that can survive to adulthood. Great. But it's a broken gene. In fact, it's a disease that's painful. But it's better to be sick than to be dead when you're talking about, reproducing and having children.
It still doesn't follow, right? It still doesn't follow because guess what? Anything they point to, in that instance, the immunity or the ability to defend against a certain disease from an accidental gene or whatever, something like this, something that's broken, it doesn't follow that evolution, as it's claimed, what it's claiming, is true. It has nothing to do with it. In fact, it's kind of pathetic. It's pathetic because every instance you point to something that's broken, you're pointing to something that's broken inside a population that you just grant yourself. You already granted yourself the bears. You already granted yourself the mosquitoes, or the people who are who have something genetic about them that allows them to withstand exposure to a disease or whatever. They're still people. There's still bears. There's still has nothing to do with this view that we have a common ancestor, that ultimately everything's back to this nebulous creature called Luca, who's an acronym, a concept, and that from there we all evolved. We all changed and evolved. This is totally irrelevant to the point. $50. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, Chaw.
That is a big super chat!
He says, even as a kid, I found the idea that you'd have some mutation that over time became some new organ. That required consistent but controlled pressure makes no sense. Right, the flashpoint between not an organ and suddenly liver is baffling, yeah. And you notice, Chaw, every time you ask them, again, thank you, W's in the chat for that very generous tip. When you ask them, well, doesn't evolution have to produce this thing called a liver? And yeah, we start with a proto-liver. No, you don't. You don't start with a proto-liver. You don't. You have to start with a not that, and then a that. You can't start with a that, or a proto-that, you cheater. Same thing with snakes. I asked some dude, how is it that, from an evolutionary view, from random selection, from natural mutation, you can extrapolate the production line of a rattlesnake's fangs, and independently of the fangs, the sacs, and independently of the sacs, a specific synthesized protein concoction that is venom. You tell me how random mutation produces individually those three, but also produces a scenario where they all work together. And you know what they say? Well, Jimbob, I mean, that's the fangs were passed down from a previous thing. Oh, cool. So random mutation had to produce the fangs in the previous thing, right? Yeah. Cool. My question's unanswered still. Well, Jimbob, it's simple. In order for evolution to describe how things have their things, you need to presuppose a previous thing had those things. Wow. Amazing work. You're doing great. Snagglebee's $22, sorry. 46 of 50. My muffler broke, dude. Now my car sounds awesome. Yeah. Now you're surviving.
So it's a kind of an extreme example, but those three examples are something that's broken. So yeah, natural selection can work on a few things.
I hope to get poisonous fangs. Yeah, seriously. Or even non-poisonous. It's like, if it's totally accidental, like, what if predators realized that getting bit by a rattlesnake meant you got a B12 injection and actually aided to your survival? And because it aided to your survival, you actually naturally felt inclined to protect the rattlesnake. It was like a sacred animal in your ecosystem.
Things, yeah.
So it basically we see the
Like we evolved to not step on and eat the snake. You badger, stop eating our B12 snakes.
mutation provides a benefit in a specific environmental context.
In contextualized benefit, but it's not benefit over the long term.
It's not a benefit.
So natural selection is always going to take the shortest, easiest route. If something occurs that allows the organism to survive, it's going, yeah, that thing is going to survive and it's going to multiply, but it doesn't mean it's multiplying because it has a good mutation. It's just something new. And a lot of new traits are broken things. We see that a lot. And that's
also new traits, broken things. It still does not tell us what speciation is, how the view is. There's a species, a population that can produce with itself. And then it produces, after a long period of time, something that's entirely not itself. Not something Not something that's a different type of species of that thing. Oh, a different species of this flower. It's the same category, different subspecies or whatever. It's that it becomes an entirely different thing altogether. Another Tukatrupa chat. This guy's on fire today. I'm evolving to the point out of the evolutionary proponent's inconsistency. Yeah. Tuka, I evolved to deny evolution. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? I want to know.
Most examples I know of things that are being naturally selected are actually broken genes.
Right. And then if that context is removed.
Brooklyn says, things that survive. Yeah, that's the groundbreaking claim from evolution.
Moved.
Things that survive, survive. How do we know? Because they survive. Look at them. Look at them go. Look at them go. They survived. They evolved to survive. No, they could have been lucky.
Like, for example.
They could have been lucky. 48, we're at 48. Soon you'll hear my wheezing breath.
Example, if malaria
One day I'll get
disappeared,
it.
sickle cell anemia, people who have that mutation would still be suffering the ill effects of sickle cell anemia.
And can we just celebrate the fact that we are supporting Jortlandia without the crutch of Mr. Jason Cassell? I mean, that's a big deal. You know, when the big kahuna leaves and goes and he has things to do, Jortlandia still maintains its sovereignty.
And now there's no way, if hypothetically.
Evolution is breaking, yeah. By that logic, evolution is simply breaking toward function. Breaking toward function. Wild, dude. Imagine an engineering firm taking that position. Hey, Jimbob, you're a new engineer at this firm. You have any ideas of how to increase the functionality and the usefulness and the streamline of our products? Yeah, I have a great idea. Have you guys considered introducing something that causes accidental breaking of the thing we're building? There's this thing called biomimicry where we engineer based on nature. And so what I see in nature is that there's these accidental breaking of the system that actually degrades the system. So I think we should take that approach. You're fired. You're dumb.
Everybody had it, there would be no way to remove it. And so it would represent a downward movement, not evolution.
Yes. So the appearance of mutations is not proof of evolution. Most often not, it goes in the wrong direction for evolution. Mm-hmm. But those are the extreme ones. What about all the more subtle mutations, the things that really don't have a profound effect on survival and reproduction?
You mean 90% of all things that you call mutations?
But it's still just a slight step down. Then the next one's a slight step down. And when you accumulate millions upon millions of those, you're genetically in trouble.
Got it. Okay, so
for instance, mutations that are incompatible with whatever the previous one is. Like, you notice how, from the evolutionary view, all the mutations that they think exist that produce something advantageous all have a sort of directionality to it, where we don't see the conflicting ones ever, you know. You don't even see the advantage ones. You don't even see it. You can't track it back. What you do is you see a trait that something has, and then you go, well, it must have mutated. That's what you say. You say it must have mutated, because look at it. It's in the genetic thing. It's in the genetic code. It had a tail. What? Randy West, $5. God bless. JB, good luck in Nashville. Thank you so much.
So that's the topic of genetic entropy in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more that we can talk about.
We could do a whole hour session just on that. But
Let's talk about ancient
mutation rates. Now, it's interesting. Obviously, this guy's not going to get any real play because, you know, this channel is Creation Ministries. So, you know, the Evo people who are deeply atheists are just going to laugh at this guy. But what's happening now is that this guy who takes a very strict position on young existence, young Earth, young biology, young everything. He's talking about DNA and he's talking about rate of mutation, and he's arguing that would need to be super fast, in fact. And people have been on this for a while. Evolution proponents are actually trying to make it last longer. They're adding time. They've been adding time this whole time. Adding more time they need more time. Well, another way of saying that is it needs to happen faster. That's the other way of saying it needs more time. It needs to happen faster. So now they're taking the latter approach, and people like the Jolly Heretic are now arguing that, well, it does happen really fast. Well, because they need it to happen really fast. Otherwise, they need more time. So instead of more time, they're going the other direction now and saying, well, no, we don't need more time. We just need it to happen faster.
Ancient DNA and how that relates to this topic.
The sheer presence of DNA that's claimed to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years old, argues against the hundreds of thousands to millions of years.
Okay.
DNA breaks down very quickly. It's attacked by oxygen. It's attacked by water. It can form knots and snap. It's attacked by all sorts of things. I mean, bacteria and fungi would eat DNA. And so when you find
Yeah.
and it's been rained on, and oxygen's probably there. If not, it's still water present.
Not even DNA, like you just go with the basic things that they argue existed. They're like, well, we found all of the components for life in space, so therefore the process can exist. No, that doesn't follow, first of all. Second of all, people like James Tour have eloquently stated this, that these building blocks, whether it's DNA, RNA, complex carbs, and whatnot, even if you granted their composition somehow miraculously fused together into some functional entity, the exposure to heat, water, changes in temperature from high to low, changes in pressure, all sorts of things are not aiding to its survival at all. In fact, it's the complete opposite. More time is death. More time is death. You don't just add time. Well, enough time. No. With a very minimal amount of time, these things are gone.
And ice crystals destroy DNA. And so we find the oldest supposed organism with DNA that's intact is found in the polar regions, in cold areas. We don't really find much in Africa where it's hot.
Okay. And that's because cold preserves DNA.
Because cold preserves it, but only to a limit. It doesn't last forever. Now, you can probably ask me next, well, how long does it last?
Yeah.
I anticipate that, right? Is that what you're going to say?
It lasts as long as I can scream goal.
We don't necessarily know. We can measure in the short term. So the oldest DNA that's claimed to be found is...
I don't know if this is controversial, but Taco isn't great at debate. Well, I think that's why he's running a debate channel. So he's not really the debater, but I agree with you.
over a million years old. They pull it out of an organism, sequence them. It's only little pieces. They're not sequencing entire genomes, but they're able to pull out pieces of DNA, sequence them, say, okay, this is what the woolly...
What's a good argument against the existence of dinosaurs? Well, I wouldn't just simply take that position. I would say that if you agree that you're just describing larger animals that existed, then fine. You can, if you want to call it a dinosaur, fine. But the problem, Ilias, is that the narrative of dinosaurs has a very modern provenance history. And so, you know, the conception of a dinosaur existed before, quote, finding one. So a variety of attacks on dinosaurs and the narrative of dinosaurs is one that almost every, quote, dinosaur thing you see is a construction from an incomplete idea. So it's like constructed. Also, any kind of view of what dinosaurs were, how they existed, how they looked is also completely constructed. So it's like arbitrary. It's like looking at something that looks like a chicken, but it's bigger, and then assuming that there's this type of existence that, you know, how it looked and how it sounded. And they craft this entire storyline through entertainment and narrative to get you to think of the term dinosaur in a very specific way. And so the counter is, why do we grant the way in which you're interpreting what you call a dinosaur? Why would we grant that? So much of it is fabricated. It doesn't follow that, like, large animals didn't exist, and large animals exist right now. The question is, the narrative of what they're calling a dinosaur is wild. It's a wild tale. It's just, it's a modern conception. And civilization, according to their view, goes back so far in writing and documentation, even rudimentary documentation of things, all the way to like cave drawings. It just seems interesting that, you know, from their perspective, you can find dinosaurs at the surface, you know, old large things at the surface. And yet the conception of a dinosaur is new. Like all of the civilizations that existed from their timeline, not one of them conceived of a dinosaur. I mean, the closest thing you have historically within sort of a documented civilization is a dragon, which ironically, the atheist naturalist laughs at, even though it's totally possible of a type of dragon that exists from an evolutionary view. It's kind of fascinating when they pick and choose what kind of animals could exist and what kind don't. It's pretty funny. A hippopotamus skeleton is perfect to illustrate that most scientists wouldn't know what a dinosaur looked like, even if they had time traveled and ate them. Yeah, I always bring this up, Snagglebeast. Let's say an animal died that had the anatomy of a hippopotamus, but let's say they didn't know hippopotamus existed. Maybe they were extinct. They didn't know when or how. It just, you found something. But the reason for extinction is like, you know, they could have luckily survived. You know, they don't know that what a hippopotamus is, right? So a group of people find the bones, and then they invent this conception of an ancient thing that is giant. But little do they know, across the world, someone finds the exact same thing, and they just know it's a hippopotamus. They're separated, though. So the question ends up being, how do you know anything you found is this thing, you know, especially from the evolutionary view, that preceded, it's an ancestor of this other thing that's big and looks the same. It looks similar. Or it's just something that died out and you found it. Luckily, it just could have survived. It's not a descendant. It's not an ancestor. I mean, it just died out. It could have lived just as much alongside of everything else today. It just died. Column Rock, bring up the skull of a hippo and tell me what you think the animal would look like if you don't know already. Interesting. That's a fun thing to do right now. Let's give it a shot. Hippo skull. Yeah. It's funny. It's the skull of a hippo. Yeah, I mean, look at that. I mean, imagine I was just working off that and my imagination kicked in. Let's say I didn't know what a hippo was. My imagination and the ability to draw on paper, even with crayons, how far I could take my imagination with this. I mean, if we didn't know what a hippo was, if they just happened to die out further back than the reality we're in, these people would be like, it's a giant capybara. What are your thoughts on dogs evolving from wolves? I wouldn't say it's an evolution. It's a category of a kind of dog. So it's like, if taxonomy is ultimately arbitrary, then a wolf is in the same type of category as a dog anyway. So it's like saying, like, what are your thoughts on dogs evolving from dogs? And I'd be like, well, that would not be the term used then. It would just be a type of large category of canine that has a bunch of subcategories that are still in the category. They never leave the category. They're still in the same category. Or clade, I think they would call it. So that's how I would push back on that. Did they evolve, or was it just domestication? You know, did man, how often, even with food, if you think about the mustard seed, how much comes from the same thing? Like the common ancestor, so to speak, for a multiplicity of vegetables and things we consume that come from mustard, a mustard plant. It's wild when you think about it. You're like, whoa, that's a lot of things. But none of it ever leaves the category. So it's more reasonable to look at things as if they have their own sourced ontology, that there's a moment they come into existence as they are what they are, and from there could be subcategories that don't ever leave the category of what they come from, but they change in these superficial ways ultimately. But they're still categorized under the branch. But to try to say that everything comes from this thing would be to say that there's a mechanism that shifts one thing outside of the category that preceded it. Well, is that a new category then? Then it's endless regress. You know what I mean? Think of it visually. Here's the beginning of a category. Well, from the evolutionary view, that doesn't exist because that thing is not truly a beginning of a category. That's a branch, a splinter off from another big category, and so on. So they're just in an endless state of doing fractal categorizations, fractal taxonomy. You're like, when does one category begin and one end? I don't know. You know what I mean? Tell me when. I don't know. It just does over time, sometime. It never changes. It never skips its full category. It's always in a subcategory. But that's their biggest problem, is that in order to say there's such a thing as a category inside of which subcategories could exist, canine, wolf, dog, whatever it is, mustard, all the rest of the plants, they have to hold that one of those categories is itself unchanging and universal. But they can't. They have to tell me that the category itself, the particular thing they're pointing to, is also a super subcategory and just never ends. My grandpa was a retardigrade. Is that an ice bear or a water bear? Is that what retardigrade is? Anyway, can you imagine how great the world would be if humans didn't start incessantly trying to disprove the Bible? Well, it's a spiritual issue. It's spiritual. Evolution has to say we're still in the category of fish. They do, Orthobro. It's hilarious. They also have to say something. Got a shout out to who gave me this, which I'm going to use forever. They have to say that George Floyd is an ape. George Floyd is an ape. Hello, Emmanuel. I have a friend in Bulgaria who believes in evolution. Can you give me some content for anti-evolution catechesis? I mean, watch some of my debates. I mean, ask him basic things, Emmanuel. Try this on him. You know, when you get a beer, when you grab a beer with him next time, okay, buddy? You know, kind of elbow him and go, hey, I'm really interested in evolution. Can you tell me how random mutation produced a liver? Hyper specialized function? Can you tell me how that happened? You know, you got to press them on these things. Go granular. That's my advice. Go granular. Don't go vague, low resolution. Go high resolution. High resolution. And also ask him if George Floyd was an ape. It's a good tactic I like to use.
The mammoth or the ancient horse or the cave bear, this is their DNA and this is what their genome might have been like. But we don't know how old that stuff really is. And based on DNA decay rates, there shouldn't be any DNA there. So you're probably wondering, how do we measure the DNA decay rate? Well, we actually can't.
What's the rate?
We can measure over the short term in the laboratory, But how do you extrapolate that to hundreds of thousands of years? So the one study that I know of that tried to do this, they used ancient moa bones from New Zealand.
Yeah.
They carbon dated
was
the
a
moa bones.
big bird, right?
Yeah, giant bird. They carbon dated the bones, and then they measured all the pieces of DNA that were in the bones and how long they were. And they had a decay curve of how fast DNA breaks down over time. Okay, based on that, there's no way you're going to find DNA in something like a 1,000,000-year-old animal, even in permafrost.
Okay.
You definitely never find it in like a dinosaur
Okay.
because they supposedly died out 65 million years ago. There's no way there's DNA there, but there's biochemical evidence of DNA. There's microscopic evidence of DNA in dinosaurs.
Is it possible for aliens to exist? I mean, I don't think so. Because to say aliens exist is to assume something about cosmology, that we can travel through this thing called space. I don't even believe that. I think we're in a closed system, Harry. So I don't think aliens, like, let's say hypothetically, we're in a closed space and there's some space outside of this space. Aliens would no longer be called aliens. All you'd be doing is expanding the nature of reality to include this new space, but it's not a new space. It already existed. So if aliens exist, there's no need to call them aliens unless you're just referring to a type of animal or creature that doesn't live locally with us. If that's the meaning of alien, the question of what is this existence is assumed. You have to assume what is this existence. So to say aliens, you're assuming the existence is this existence, and there's local existence, but there's also a satellite existence out there. I don't believe there's a satellite existence out there. I don't believe that. I think we're bound and locked in. This is a created system, closed. I don't believe in a multiplicity of life systems. Joe Suarez, $5. Regardless, even if you granted aliens or some sort of invented creature that visits and has some intentionality or whatever, they're still bound by the same. You'd still have to tag them. For instance, if I met an alien and it was super intelligent, I would still run tag on them. JB, have you ever thought about playing politically themed games on stream, such as BioShock? It would definitely tune into your critiquing the themes. Is that a politically game? I don't know. I'll check that out. I play shoot 'em games. I like shooting, and I like shooting. I like using a sniper rifle to shoot people in the head. BioShock, I'll check it out. Is that the kind of game where you're kind of playing passively and hanging out, but like the board is like complex and it's not like an action game where you're running around, shooting people? I'll check it out though.
We don't have sequence data yet because the pieces, that stuff, if the dinosaurs died in Noah's flood, that's 4,500 years old. That's really, really, really old for DNA. It should be almost all broken down, but there's some left in some cases. I know of at least two.
See, this argument, I'm not sure this is the greatest argument because it assumes that you have full knowledge of other variables that could preserve DNA for a longer period of time. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm going to play the naturalist atheist card here. Say, well, even if we granted that, it still wouldn't follow that there aren't other conditions in which DNA could be preserved if you granted quadrillion billion years existence. You know what I mean? That's what they would say. You know what I mean? It's a shooty game. It's all about libertarian failure. Nice. That's fun. I could go in there and troll libertarians. Is it online where you can talk to people?
Groups.
Right, good idea.
That are
Nice. I'll get it. Of course. I'll get it right now. I'll start a stream right now. Speaking of, it's 1. I have a call I'm going to get out of here at 2, I think. Eat some lunch. Sort some things out in my life.
chasing dinosaur DNA. Someone's going to do it eventually. It's just difficult because when you pull a dinosaur bone out of the dirt, is full of modern bacteria and modern fungi, and the amount of DNA from those organisms way overwhelms the little bit of trace amounts of ancient DNA that might be present.
So are you saying that we could get Jurassic Park soon? Because I would like to go to that.
Man, I would too, but no, we're not. That's not going to happen.
Okay.
There is a team in Japan that's working on cloning a woolly mammoth, and they've got millions of dollars, and they're working on it, and they're making some progress, but they're not actually going to clone the mammoth because the mammoth genome is broken down. It's in pieces. You can't just take the DNA out of a mammoth cell and stick it into an
Xbox? No, I would. Any game I'm going to play with you guys is going to be on the PC. I know there's a crossover thing where you can play your Xbox games on the PC. I still haven't figured it out. But I would just get it on Steam. That's what I would do.
elephant egg cell, say, and make it a mammoth. So what they're going to do is
No Japan virus, please.
they know the genome of the mammoths. Okay, that's the gene for the hairiness. That's the one that makes the big tusks. This gene might affect the funny shape of their head. And they're going to genetically engineer an elephant with those traits.
Battlefield 6, it looked pretty good. I tried it out for a bit. Obviously, the best players are in there right now, so you just kind of get annihilated. I'm still practicing on Battlefield 5, which I still like a lot. But I'll grab 6 in October. Maybe do an evening stream with it.
Traits, and then try to
Play Grounded 2 with us. That's funny. I tried that. That's when you're a tiny person in the grass. I could see how I can get hooked on that. I didn't let myself get hooked on that. Trying to send some woman masculine energy toward the goal. Thank you so much. Thank you for your woman masculine energy. And all of you men in the chat should be ashamed of how much the female financially participates and supports here at Jortlandia. I mean, it's questionable. It's getting to questionable levels. Thank you, Abby Zong.
to put that egg into a female elephant and have her give birth to what looks like a woolly mammoth.
4? I didn't try 4 yet. I should try 4 too. I mean, I like 5. I like the gameplay. It's a little silly. There's some silly movements sometimes with the players and stuff, and sometimes I get kicked off the server mid-game.
Got it.
But you can't do that with dinosaurs. See, a woolly mammoth is an elephant. So you can change the elephant DNA to make it look more like a woolly mammoth. What's like a dinosaur? Nothing.
Yeah.
There's no comparable species that you.
Well, they say a bird and a chicken, right? They say both. They're like, well, a dinosaur. The other thing about dinosaurs, it's wild to think that from their view, a dinosaur had to evolve to be a dinosaur. So you're still stuck in, well, what's a dinosaur before a dinosaur then? They say chicken? Yes. Is a chicken also a result of the dinosaur? Yes. So what came first, the chicken or the dinosaur? Well, it's both, Jimbob. The chicken is clearly a dinosaur. Look at the T-Rex. Okay. So then did all these big animals evolve from not big animals? Yes? No?
You can manipulate to resurrect a dinosaur. So it's not actually going to happen. But someday.
Joe Gagan. God bless Joe Gagan. He finally left the bear cult.
We're going to have dinosaur DNA. It's just a
Say the crocodile's a dinosaur? Yeah. Did it come from not a crocodile? Well, yeah, duh, Jimbob. It came from a chicken dial. It came from a croco-chicken.
technical question of who's going to do
It
it
came from something. It came from an ostrich. Yeah.
first and what's the best specimen to use. It's going to happen. But that dinosaur DNA will contradict the age of the bones.
Okay.
Now, I said a minute ago that they use carbon dating to date the Moa bones.
That's right, yeah. And I know that we have a lot of materials here at CMI about carbon dating.
A lot of things. In fact, in my article, How Carbon Dating Works on creation.com, I have a chart.
You got creation.com? I tried to get that years ago. You're the one who beat me to that? I was going to sell that for $1 billion, bucko. I wonder how much you could sell creation.com for right now. We're all landwells, obviously. Smells more like a crock of shit, yeah.
Of how as you go further back in time, the carbon dates start leaving the historical dates. The carbon dates are older than the historical dates. And I suspect that the closer to the flood you get, the more they diverge from reality.
And we're talking about historical dates of things
Artifacts.
artifacts that we can pretty reliably verify.
Yeah, the
were
destruction layer at Jericho or a pharaoh's sarcophagus. In fact, the Willard Libby, who invented carbon dating, he validated his technique on Egyptian coffins. And he said, it's the strangest thing. The oldest coffins that I'm using diverged more from the expected date than the younger ones.
Okay.
And
so
there's
that's
more. I really think that the closer to the flood you get, you're going to get an escalation of the carbon dates because, well, there's some carbon-14 in dinosaur bones, a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that's telling us that there's a little bit of carbon-14 before the flood. There's a lot more now because as Earth's magnetic field collapses, as we see, as all sorts of other reasons for expecting carbon-14 to change over time. Creation.com is a great resource, everybody.
I should have bought that domain name when I had the chance. You know what I mean? Did Owen not let him on his land? I don't know what happened. Something happened socially where he got ostracized. I knew that was coming. Poor guy. How come these evolution types never get into taxonomy of the dreaded Croco-Stimpy? It's a cry of happy, happy, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy, happy, astounding, non-communicating language sounds, yeah. By the way, speaking of degenerate, if you guys think today we live in a degenerate time, I don't even advocate for this, but if you wanted to, go watch any random Ren and Stimpy clip. You will be horrified. Horrified.